Hello and welcome, everybody. This is our podcast, Welcome to Livingston. My name is Don Putkela.
And I'm Angela Putkela, and we're with the Putkela Group Real Estate Professionals.
Yes, and we are so excited for our podcast today. You know, usually we bring in local businesses and such and talk to them, but, you know, every once in a while we sit back and we talk a little bit of real estate. So this is our second in a series where we kind of talk about the different aspects of real estate. And we're going to be talking about the buying process today. So I'm really excited about that.
Right. Yes. No, our buyers are wonderful. It really gives us a chance to get to know them. And it's nice to go through the process since we frequently will work with first-time home buyers. Sometimes people don't know all the steps involved.
Exactly. And it's interesting you said that because we get to know our sellers quite well, but nothing like you get to know a buyer.
Yeah.
A buyer, it's a whole different feel because you're going out, you're looking at houses, you're talking about different things than you do when you're selling a house.
Right.
Both of them are very personal, but you know, the buying process, I just love going out to look at homes and you
Who
find
doesn't?
so many
It's so much
surprising things, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what we wanted to do today is we kind of wanted to talk through the process of how we work with buyers and what that process looks like to help somebody understand it, because there are so many twists and turns in it and it's not just a straight line, right? So
Right.
I think the first thing we usually try to do is you want to sit down with your buyer, in person if possible, or over the phone, or even a lot of times end up doing it out on showings or standing in your driveway and such. But talking about what it is you're looking for in a home. Right. Because there's so many things that go into that. And a lot of times you can't have everything, right? So we talk a lot about what's most important to the buyer. You know, what is their why for moving? Because if you can figure out why they want to move, then you can kind of tailor what kind of houses they see to that.
Well, tailor the experience, right? To make sure that it's as efficient as possible for them. Sometimes it's a learning process for people too, though.
Right. And a lot of times we're working around schedules. We're working around their kids' schedules. We're working around, when we're able to get into the houses and such. But you're 100% right. It's a learning process. So that process kind of hones itself in and you narrow that field of what you're looking for as you go.
So different for each and every person.
Right, because there are some people out there that will only look at one or two homes, and there's some people that will look at 46 homes.
This is true. This is true.
So, somewhere in the neighborhood of, I'd say, 7 to 10 homes is pretty normal.
Yep.
More than one or two, but less than when you're starting to get confused. Because usually after the first couple of homes, they kind of realize,
blend.
This is what I want. But they do blend.
Is true. Yeah. But
right?
You're right. It helps offer perspective because seeing homes that aren't quite what they want gives a greater appreciation for what it is that they do want and
Exactly.
what's non-negotiable and, what do they have a little bit of give on? How many times do we have a client that really is thinking one way, but then through the process, they're really honing in more on what their priorities are.
Right. Well, I find that real interesting because I talk about that a lot, especially with you and such, that we'll sit down and we'll talk to someone and they'll tell me how important the yard is, or they'll tell me how important the garage is, or the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
Or the size that they're looking for. And then we go out to homes, but they're spending all their time in something we didn't talk about. Right. Maybe they were talking about how important the yard and the garage is, but they're waxing poetically over the kitchen, right?
Right, or the basement of all of a sudden, it's all about the basement as we go out. And so we help them come to realize that, maybe the garage isn't as important as the basement to them.
Right. So, the things we look at is obviously location, right? Mm-hmm. You want to look at the size of the home. Sometimes people are saying, hey, my main priority is I need to get bigger or I need to get smaller. Right. Mm-hmm. Because, they're busting at the seams or they're empty nesters now and they had a big house. Right.
And I can't get over it because people will get tied to certain square footage, but based on the floor plan of some of these homes, some of them really lifestyle wise have a lot more room, even in fewer square feet.
Right. And I'm going to pause right there because that's such a good point. You give a really good example of this. We've been doing this a while. How has coming out of the pandemic changed the type of house people look for.
Oh my gosh. It like turned on a dime. All of a sudden, home offices, people really couldn't care about. Now it's one of the biggest drivers of why people have moved in the last 2 years.
Right. Now they want the pool.
Yes.
Now they want the finished basement.
It becomes the lifestyle situation, right?
Right. Well, I think one of the most interesting things is the home office is huge, but the layout. They don't want an open concept.
You're right. Right before the pandemic, open concept was everything. That's what everybody wanted. Everyone wanted that wide open space where you can hear and see everything. And then once everybody was trapped in their houses,
they didn't want to hear and see each other anymore.
Yeah. So then, it's sort of this resurgence in some of these homes built in the 1990s or before that had these separated rooms. Because all of a sudden modern lifestyles lent itself to having those separate spaces or room for an office.
Right. That dining room makes a great second office.
Yeah.
Because sometimes now they need two of them.
Yes.
Husband and wife, they both work from home, mom and dad.
Whereas just before that, the dining room was kind of a throwaway.
It was a throwaway. It was the kids' playroom. It was,
They just,
there was a dining room table in there that was collecting dust. So I think it's interesting because we look at all those things, how many bedrooms do you need? But the things that people don't realize that I have conversations with, Livingston County is growing, and a lot of people are coming from in town, from Oakland County, from Wayne County out to Livingston County because they can work from home now, because the wide open space that they're looking for in their yard and such. But I have this conversation with them, and I say,
taxes too.
Well, taxes is a big deal. They're a lot lower out here.
Right.
But I have this conversation. Have you ever been on well water? And if they say, what's well water or what's a water softener? Now we have to have a conversation. Right. Or they say, I really want 5 acres and a pole barn. And I say, are you okay with propane? And what do you mean? Okay, so now we have to have a conversation about these things, because just because you think you want something, when I explain to you what that means, sometimes you have a different idea. You'll have people that say, I want to be on city water. I need sidewalks. It's important that my kids are close to other kids. I want to be in a neighborhood, right? Or I want something that's downtown because I want to be able to walk to restaurants. So all of those things make a big deal. And then a lot of times, are you looking at an existing house? Are you open to a new build?
That's true. Now, within that, talking about well water and natural gas and so forth, is sewer and septic.
Sewer and septic's a big deal.
That's something too.
Some people, they hear horror stories about septic fields. So they don't want to be one. Other ones, it's like, oh, I grew up on that. Or, oh, I just talked to my dad and he says, don't worry about it. Or I talked to a friend.
But it's an education process, because some people don't know what that is or what's involved.
Right. And we have a good inspector that can really talk to that when you get to that point. Say, okay, don't stress over it. I'm going to give you an overview of this is what it looks like and everything. But we get to that point where it's like, hey, isn't it nice to not have a water and a sewer bill as well?
Yeah, this is true. But before we look at houses, we kind of have a good beat on that.
Yeah, so we go through that whole process. We have a conversation, we talk about it, and we understand that the priorities change over time.
Yes.
As you get into the homes. So that's why I say at the beginning, please don't limit yourself. If you make that field so narrow because you have so many priorities, then you're missing out on houses that may be perfect for you. Yeah. So don't worry about sending me out to too many homes. I'm okay going out to see them. And sometimes I'll add a home or two and say, hey, listen, I was looking at this, and this is one you really should see.
And there's some of our best clients that can attest to that.
Exactly.
We want them to be happy.
And remember, we do deal with new builds. We do deal a lot with vacant land. We do deal with helping you connect with a builder. So all of those things are things that you should have an agent for. There's a lot going on out there. So, but we're going out, we're looking at all those things, pre-approval.
Yes.
A lot of people, we'd like to sit down with a local lender, sit down, get your pre-approval in mind, and know what you can afford. Know what you're going out to look at. Know how much taxes impact that. Because that way, if you see the perfect house, we're ready to put in an offer, and we have a relationship with so many lenders. If you come in and you have your own lender, we'll form a relationship with that lender, because we want to be able to say, this is what your monthly payment's going to be. Because so many people get caught up with, hey, I'm pre-approved up to 450. Well, what does that mean, right? Your monthly payment is what matters. And a lot of times people don't understand how much taxes can impact that. And then there's types of loans.
Yes. Because certain loans aren't available for.
Right. Yeah. So, you have your rural development, your FHA, your VA if you're a veteran, your conventional. There's so many things that go out there.
Great options, particularly for first-time home buyers.
Right. And one of the conversations we have at the beginning is how handy are you? Because, if you go into a house that needs a lot of work, but you don't know how to do any of that work and you're going to hire it all out, let's have a conversation. Do you have the resources to do that? Or are you getting in over your head? Is that something you want? Right?
Or, you might want everything all completely fixed up, dudded up, but then the price tag is so much higher that if you're able to take care of some of the things yourself, even, hire to have those things done, but then get the house for less money and be able to pick out what you want, there's something to be said there, particularly for just new flooring or new counters.
Yeah. You have your size of the house, your quality of the house, your location of the house. All those are the three big that impact your condition, impact the price of the house.
So it could have great quality, circa 1984.
Exactly. So, you look at those things and then sometimes we say, hey, you want all these things. We should move to the next town over because it's a little bit cheaper. You look at Howell versus Brighton versus Fowlerville, all great communities.
It's the interesting thing to me is a lot of times people are looking for a particular house and a particular price. However, they don't realize that house doesn't exist at that price in that city, but it does exist in that price at a neighboring city, are very indicative of what zip code that they're in or what school district.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So all those impacts. So we go through all those things and the lender is going to talk to you about your down payment, your closing costs, the types of loans available. We're going to sit down and talk to you about those things. They're going to remind you, don't go out and buy a truck or don't go out and buy your furniture before you close. And we're going to remind you of that as well to not make sure you put your loan at risk.
Well, and watch out for big cash payments into your account. Because
we've had that a couple times.
We've had that a few times. People with a garage sale, right?
Yeah, they sell their zero-turn tractor and then they deposit $1,500 into the account, and then the lender pulls their bank statement and says, "Hey, where'd this $1,500 come from?"
You need to source it.
You need to source it. You need an explanation. Same thing with extra tip money.
Yes. So for servers, or we had someone pick up a secondary job that had the extra tips in it and needed to figure out sourcing that too. What's going into your account as well too that has to be able to be traced. So
100%.
Be aware of it.
Yep. So, we talk to you about everything you want into a home. We make sure you get a good pre-approval. Now we're going to go out and do showings. Showings are such an interesting thing and I love them. It takes a couple times to really get to know your buyers. Some buyers will take 4 minutes in a house.
This is true.
They will walk through the front door and they'll be like, I'm done here. I've had some buyers that won't even get out of the car. Right.
And that's frequently if they don't like the house. But there's been a few people that love the house, went through 5-10 minutes tops and said, this is perfect. Let's put in an offer.
Right.
It's like, wow.
But there's also some that will take 30-40 minutes, regardless of whether they like the house or not. So, getting to know that, knowing that either way is okay.
Yes.
It's all about the buyer's comfort level, making sure that they understand that. And then I love walking through and talking to them about houses. And, I have some construction background and such, so I can at least give my opinion. Yeah. It's always my opinion, always check with an architect, but usually I can tell you, hey, this wall could probably go down, or I have some really good vision in terms of what modifications you can make to the house to make it your home.
Right. But really freshen it up, make it more modern.
Right.
I'm not as good at that part of it, but in terms of fashion, what we're seeing style-wise, what's popular right now.
Right.
Really good at that. That's my forte.
Yeah. And some people like to, I love when I just go out and see one home, hey, I love this house. Let's go out and see it tonight. I'd rather go out and see 3 or 4 homes to give them a better idea. The most homes I've done in one day is 13 homes for a client, which is a little too many. But,
that's
5 or 6 homes is pretty good.
That's robust.
That's robust.
Yes, yes. And nowadays, houses are staying on the market longer, and buyers do have choices and have the ability to go see them. And the last year or two here, as the market was so hot, it was always onesie twosie.
Right.
"Ooh, this one just came up today. Let's go see it."
Right. And, we're heading into winter right now. So I remind my clients, hey, let's check out the Google Street View. Let's check out the Google Earth. And you can see it during the summer. You can see the leaves on the trees and such if you're not able to see that, because that's one of the fears people have during the winter sometimes. The yard is covered in 6-8 inches of snow and they don't know what's underneath it.
Right.
I have tools to figure out what's underneath it so that they at least can get an idea of what they're looking at, because it's our job to eliminate the unknowns.
Right. So no matter what the season is, there's definite resources and tools and advantages, because in the wintertime, there's less competition as well too. So that definitely helps versus say the spring or the summer.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you're going through the house, they're seeing whether it's something that intrigues them. Do they feel at home in it? Does it have the amenities they're looking for? If it's in a new town, I tell them, hey, go downtown, walk around, have dinner. You'll realize whether you like the community that you're looking in. If you're coming from out of state, which I've had quite a few people of like, hey, I'm going to come in for the weekend and we're going to look at houses.
Or out of county.
Or out of county. So I'm looking in Milford, I'm looking in Brighton, I'm looking in Howell, maybe we're down in South Lyon. And they're trying to figure out what they're looking at, right?
Yeah. Because each community is so different.
Right.
And even within a community, just taking a walk in the neighborhood even. We've had people do that to say, hey, you showed us this house. After we finished, we decided to go for a walk. And we were struck by how friendly everybody was. People were saying hi to us as we walked down the sidewalk. And that was just refreshing and different from where they had come from.
Right, yep. And then open houses, some of our clients like to go to open houses. I always remind them to let them know that we're their agents while they're going through the open house. Don't give away too much information, but it gives them a nice basis, especially if it's a house that they're like, hey, I don't know if I'm even really interested in this, but they have an open house,
And sometimes we'll come with them because they want our perspective, and that's great too.
Yep. And then disclosures for buyers, understand that when the seller is listing the house, they're going to fill out a sheet called their seller's disclosures that they say everything that they know about the home. It's not going to have the unknown things such as is there mold in the attic or what type of insulation, because they usually don't know what type of insulation they have or how deep the insulation is. But what they do is they're going to say, if they know how old the roof is, they'll put it on there. If they know how deep the well is, they'll put it on there. If they know what type of plumbing they have, is it copper, is it PVC, is it PEX? They'll put those things on there. So it gives us a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the mechanicals of the house that are unknown. Because remember, when you're going through a showing, you're going to look at the top basis level of all the things, but the inspection is to find out those other items.
Right.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. Right. So let's say they went through, they found a house, they loved the house. They say, Don, Angela, I want to make an offer on this house. Right. So we walk them through the process of the offer. We, say, hey, this is what the house is listed at. This is how many days it's been on the market. We did a little bit of analysis. This is how much we think it's worth. We talk about what a good offer would be on the house. And then we talk about the specifics behind the offer. Right. Are they asking for occupancy?
Which, by the way, means that the seller needs time after they sell the house before they're able to move out. So while you as a buyer may own the house, they're still going to be living there, whether it's 7 days, 10 days, however much you've negotiated. If you didn't negotiate to get the keys right then, which sometimes can be possible, but in a lot of cases, that's something that is super important to a seller that isn't quite as much of an inconvenience to that buyer. Right. Maybe even 30 days, 60 days is the longest that I've seen.
Right. And as a buyer, we've had a conversation beforehand. Are you able to accommodate occupancy?
Right.
Right. So we know what kind of wiggle room we have there. We're going to talk about earnest money deposit. How much money are you going to put down to show in good faith that, you're moving forward, that you have some skin in the game, right? It's a good faith deposit that goes towards your closing costs.
Right.
Right. And if for some reason the inspection goes bad, the home doesn't appraise, or for no fault of your own, you lose the loan. There's a life change that you lost your job, right?
Right.
Then you get that earnest money deposit back.
Right. But if you change your mind the day before closing and said, I don't think I want to buy this house anymore, that's the times when it protects the seller from that situation. And so then the deposit would go to them.
Right.
But there were all those, things that the buyer does get it back if some of those should happen.
Yep. And one of the things that we talk about during the showing is what's included in the house. And that goes into your offer. So we're talking about, are all the appliances included? Mm-hmm. Is there a freezer in the basement that's not included? Is there a portable fireplace that they're taking with them? Is the water softener rented and it's going to leave? So we're discussing those things. And for all those buyers out there, understand that the trend lately is more and more often I'm seeing washers and dryers not included.
Right.
People are taking those with them. So we just understand that going in, and we understand that when we're writing the offer, hey, the washer and dryer isn't included. You're going to have to purchase those. That may have an impact on the price that we put on it.
Back to the lender, don't go out and charge them and buy them before you close.
Exactly, because they are going to pull your credit within 48 hours of closing. And if they see a new charge on there from Lowe's or Home Depot, it can impact your ability to keep the loan. Mm-hmm. So at a minimum, I say don't do it at all. But if you need to do something, you need to call the lender so that they can say, hey, is this going to affect you or not? Exactly. All right. So we go through all those things. We talk about occupancy. If you need concessions, we're going to talk about that. That means that you're asking for the seller to pay part of the closing costs. So we get to the inspection. Inspection is so important. Every buyer needs an inspection, yes. Preferably by a professional. I love dads and uncles and your friend who's a builder. I would rather you go out and hire somebody that this is their full-time job, that's what they're doing, because they're coming in to find the unknowns in the house.
Right. You want your eyes wide open. You want to know exactly what is going on with this house, because as your agent allows us to be able to negotiate to get those things rectified before you move in.
Right. Right. And the goal is that everything looks good, but they're there to A, find the unknowns, and B, let you know the things that you're going to need to take care of in the next 2 to 5 years.
Right. Or, even a little bit longer. It gives you an idea of like, all right, this is your honeydew list, right? Over the next.
Or, hey, the roof looks good, but it probably has 3 years left on it. You might want to put that on your radar to start saving money for it.
Right.
We're not asking for anything because the roof is good today.
Yeah.
Right. But we know what's coming down the road.
Exactly.
Right.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yep. So the next step after that, we go through the inspection process. We negotiate that for you. After we made the offer and it was accepted, we sent it over to the lender so they got started on their side. What they're going to do is they're going to order an appraisal. An appraisal is a third party that comes in and says, is the home worth to the bank what we think it's worth to you? So the appraisal value has to come in at the loan, at the amount you're purchasing the house or above. If there's a gap there, then we have to negotiate that. So if you put in an offer of a house at $300 and the appraisal came in at $295, we have a $5,000 gap that we have to negotiate. Are they going to drop the price $5,000? Are you going to bring $5,000 in cash? Or are we going to meet somewhere in the middle? So that's our job to help you through that process and do that. But the hope is that it appraises and we don't have an issue. Right. Now,
and that's why we do the homework on the front end.
Right.
To make a case and understand that, yes.
Yeah. The other thing the appraiser does is if you had a government-backed loan like an RD, a VA, or an FHA, there may be repairs that need to happen before the appraisal is approved. Again, that's our job to know about those before we go into it. So when I'm going through a showing, I'm looking at it saying, I know what the list is.
Right. And an inspector will too.
An inspector will as well as, hey, this could be an issue. right? So we go through those things. During this process as well, you're going to be getting homeowners insurance. If you have a company that you've been working with, call them up, get a quote. The lender will tell you what the criteria is they need for it. If you do not have one, you can get some names from us, but the lender usually has a list of names that they're working with that are really good lenders. If you have auto insurance, call up the person that does your
homeowners insurance.
Well, no, for bundling.
Well, yes, you said
right.
lenders.
No, yeah, the lenders will have a list of people that do homeowners insurance. But if you personally have auto insurance, those companies usually do homeowners insurance as well, and a lot of times are able to bundle and bring your
big savings
down. So your car and your home should preferably be with the same insurance company because you're going to get a deal that way.
Right. It makes sense. And it's a lot more efficient for you too.
Yep.
In terms of title insurance, that's something that's very important. We always ask for the very best title insurance. That's something that, gets tied into the closing costs and so forth, but covered by the seller. But in that case, it protects you in case there's a boundary dispute or, an issue with the chain of title.
Also issues with basements that have been finished that maybe permits weren't pulled.
Right. Yes, it protects you, whereas the lesser title insurance does not.
Right, and the big thing, one of the big things is like liens on the property. Okay, so let's say a lien was put on the property that didn't show up in the title work. And then, 6 months later, there's a notice, hey, we put in the furnace and it was never paid. Well, that's not your problem. Now that's the title company's problem because you have the right title insurance that takes care of those issues.
Exactly.
And it's important to have that. And we make sure that, every loan is going to you're going to have title insurance. We're going to make sure you have the right kind of title insurance.
Exactly.
The title company does a really good job. As you're moving towards closing, you're going to find out what your final number of closing costs is. Know that those numbers are reviewed by the title company, they're reviewed by the lender, and they're reviewed by your agent. Okay? Myself and Angela, we review those and look over all those numbers. There are some agents that don't always look over those numbers, but you need to make sure that you know what you're looking at.
Exactly. But that way you're prepared before you ever even come in.
Right.
And are able to get, in terms of the payment at closing.
Right.
To be prepared for
that.
You
should have 24 to 48 hours to that number that you need to bring to closing. Most title companies will allow you to bring a cashier's check. There's some title companies that will require a wire if it's over a certain amount, either $5,000 or $10,000. If you are doing a wire, understand that those wiring instructions will never come from your agent, but always double check those. Do not call the number from the email that came in. You call the title company or you call your bank or you call your agent to say, hey, is this accurate? Because wiring instructions can be hacked. And that's why I always think a cashier's check is a better option.
Right, exactly. Just, fraud is out there. Be forewarned, real estate transactions are something that hackers do zero in on.
Right.
And all it takes is just checking in with the right person, just place a phone call.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons I love First American, because they don't have that $5,000 or $10,000 limit. Mm-hmm. If your closing cost is $14,000, you can bring in a cashier's check for $14,000. And then you don't have to worry about the wire.
So in terms of the final walkthrough, that's an important part of this too.
So usually the day before closing, maybe the morning of closing, but I prefer the day before closing just in case there's an issue. We will take you out to walk through the home a final time. This is a 5-minute showing. This is not a long showing. I'm walking through the house and I'm making sure that everything that's supposed to be there is still there. And I'm making sure that there's no new damage to the house. 99% of the time, there's nothing wrong and everything is perfect. And if you're not getting keys at closing and there's occupancy, I'll have buyers that say, do we still need to do a walkthrough? Yes, we still need to do a walkthrough. But that there's nothing going to be changed because they have 2 more weeks to move. Right. And the house isn't going to look perfect because there's going to be boxes and they're going to be packing stuff up. But we're making sure that all the appliances are still there, that there's no water in the basement, that there's no damage to something in the house.
Right. Our biggest example of this was a young couple. She was 9.5 months pregnant. She was going to give birth.
She was overdue.
So she didn't come to the walkthrough. It was just Don and the husband. They just zipped through. Okay, everything looks fine. He calls me from the road and he says, pull up the pictures. Tell me if it's a new washer and dryer, because I remember there being a new washer and dryer, and that wasn't there when we went through. Sure enough, it was. They had swapped it out to old ones, so they must have gotten into their new house, said, oh, I'd rather have the new ones. And so this poor gal would have been just absolutely devastated when she came in to say, what happened to my washer and dryer? So since we identified this before closing, we could call up the agent and said, hey, your sellers have swapped out the washer and dryer. That's not what we put an offer in on. So they have two choices. They can either replace it or offer the buyers the money to make sure that they have a new washer and dryer.
Yes, and surprisingly, the new washer and dryer were back the next morning.
Very next morning. But that attention to detail is huge because things can happen in real estate transactions.
You do.
And as buyers, it makes me feel good to be able to protect them, but always have that good relationship with the agents on the other side to say, come on.
Well, that's why the experience is so important, because we've seen so many things. We know what the triggers are. We know what to look for.
Yes.
Right? We know to ask the question of, is the water softener owned or rented?
Oh, exactly.
Right? We know to check and make sure that the fixtures that are included are actually included. They're staying there. Right?
Exactly. It's astounding. I had a friend from way out of the area. I'm like, who would have ever known that it was a rented water softener? Like, yeah, that's kind of one of those things that you just have to know.
Right. Yeah.
So it gets kind of interesting. And, there's always something new that pops up.
Right.
And I love that.
Yep. And in this process, if you're buying a house that's in a subdivision with an HOA, we are getting you the bylaws. You're looking over the bylaws. And if I know something's important to you, you have dogs and you do not want an electronic fence and you need a fence, a real fence. Well, we're making sure that that's able to be put in before you ever put in an offer.
Right.
Right. Those specifics are those unknowns that you don't want to have a question over later.
Right. You just nip them in the bud right then and there.
Exactly.
And just keep everything. There's enough to worry about anyway. Why come up with more?
Right.
It's best to get ahead of that.
And one of the things I saw last year is just because the neighbor has a fence doesn't mean you can get a fence. Sometimes there's extenuating circumstances, or in this case, the neighbor's house used to have a pool and now the pool isn't there anymore, but the fence is still there. Mm-hmm. So it was in a subdivision that did not allow fences. Somehow they were able to get one. And again, it's a question of you want to dot your I's, cross your T's.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Never, ever assume.
Yep.
This isn't the business for that.
Yep.
Now, key exchanges. So when there is occupancy, then we connect to get that key.
Yeah, we connect to get that key. You're going to go out there. You're going to sign a sheet of paper saying, hey, I'm taking the key now. Again, we're looking over the house, making sure it looks okay. But the key exchange happens at the end of the occupancy. Sometimes you have a security deposit that is taking care of any damage. Sometimes you don't have one. You're going a little bit on faith. But again, 99% of the time, sellers are taking care of the house because it's their house and they have pride in it. And they're still taking care of it even if they have 7 days of occupancy.
Right. Or more.
Or more. So it's not something you need to worry about. It's something you need to be aware of.
Right. It's interesting because the time that we have seen a seller, not take as good of care is when there was some kind of deposit required.
Right. Because they had a bad experience in the past and they said, well, I have $1,000 security deposit. They're going to find some reason to take it anyway. So now they're not as careful.
Right. So I have seen that. So, especially as it's been a good transaction, there's, good karma between everybody.
Well, what I love is when they leave notes.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes they leave
right?
gifts. They'll walk them through the house. We've had a couple houses that had a secret room that they didn't find out about until they got the keys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
So there's some history in houses. I was just talking to an agent a couple weeks ago when we were at a closing. I was talking about a farmhouse that we had sold 7 or 8 years ago that had a picture on the wall of the farmhouse from like 50 years ago. And it had been through 3 or 4 owners, but it stayed on the wall with each owner because it was like part of the house.
Right.
So I love stories like that.
Yeah. Honest to goodness.
Yep. But understand as a buyer, it can be a fast road. It can be a long road. I've had buyers that I've worked with for 3 days and they found a house. I've had buyers that I worked with for a year and a half. Right.
And in some cases, 3 years.
In some
on
cases,
and off
3
and on
years.
and off. And like, yeah, let's try it
Right.
again this year.
So know that as your agents, we're here for you. We know that your priorities change. We know that life has twists and turns, but we're here to make sure that you get to the end goal that you're looking for, and that we're there to facilitate that, to take the stress off you and to make buying a home a fun process.
Right. Because that's how it should be.
It's an amazing, fun opportunity.
Yeah.
Right?
It really, really is.
Yep.
Especially when you have the right people by your side.
Yes. So any of you out there listening to this, we would love to help you out. I love working with buyers. Angela, we both love working with buyers, and we love being a part of the process. And so many of our buyers are our friends now.
Yes. That's what I love about it. It's
Yes.
great. And we have more events so that way we can catch up with people. And we've done some episodes on people that are selling and buying at the same time, which is a thing too. But we wanted to focus on the buying here, and it's so much fun. And we wanted to be sure to kind of talk through all of this with those potential buyers out there.
Yep. So thank you so much for listening today. Please check out our other episodes. Please check out our website, welcometolivingston.com, and we would love to touch base with you. So thank you so much, and welcome to Livingston.